What's up, everybody, and welcome to NeverLag. I'm one of your hosts, Levi, joined by the man who fell in the pit, Zach. And this is another episode of NeverQuest, the show where we sit down and talk about what games we've been playing and anything else that might be on our minds pertaining to the gaming industry. If you're into it, you can support us over on Patreon at patreon.com/NeverLag. And if you have no cash, no worries. We appreciate you watching right here on YouTube and listening wherever you get your podcasts. So with all that out of the way, let's talk games. What's new, Zach? What's been going on? What have you been playing?
Oh, not much. Just the most anticipated video game I think I've had this year.
Of your life, as you said last
my
week.
life. I don't think those weren't my exact words. That was maybe an implication, but who could know? Who could go back and check records? Not me.
You said I will die happy after I play Horizon. I have no need to play any other game.
You're right. There's no way to know what I said, but yeah, I think probably like a lot of people, Horizon Forbidden West is the primary thing going on the past few days at least. So we're recording this on a Monday. It came out the previous Friday. There's a few other games I've been playing kind of here and there as well, but for the most part, Horizon has kind of taken things over for me. And I think we're going to get into our first impressions a little bit because there's some good and bad to talk about. I think we might bring some different perspectives, but overall, like, this was not the flawless launch we were hoping for. And I mean, it's certainly nowhere near like Cyberpunk, but bit of a bumpy launch in some areas. So what about you?
Same. Well, you know what? I would say same. And we are going to get into it. I had intended to have put a bunch of time into Forbidden West over this weekend. We got it on Friday, so it's been, 2.5 days, almost 3 days since we picked it up. And yeah, it's been less than ideal. It's been less than ideal. So I guess, are we just going to go ahead and get into it? We'll start talking Horizon, right?
I think we got to. We got
I mean,
it. What else is there?
That's where my brain is right now. So
what else matters in life, Levi? That's all there is. That's all I have.
Exactly. Unfortunately. So man, there's a lot of discourse out there, and I'll start by saying there's a lot of positive about Horizon Forbidden West out there. There's a lot of people who are thoroughly enjoying the game. No doubt it's a quality game. I can't wait to get back into it, but I've stopped currently for reasons that we will discuss. And so anyways, if you're having fun with it, if you're not having any trouble, that's great. Good for you. This is going to be a little bit of a bumpy road here because I am a little frustrated. I'm a little irritated. We left our last NeverQuest off somewhat patronizing a review talking about it being a 60 out of 100. It's not a 60 out of 100, right? I mean, not by any means. You wouldn't say so, right?
No, not at all.
Despite any issues we may be having,
yeah,
it's still not a 60 out of 100.
I think I'll be more positive than you probably, but yeah, even with the level of criticism I think that it justifiably has that we didn't know about last time. When last we were talking, it was mostly eager anticipation, and it felt absurd that someone could rate it that low. I still feel like it's absurd that someone would rate it that low.
I do too.
There are some big problems, especially at launch. I think there's some big technical performance problems. It's the main issue, right? And I think they will likely be resolved over time, but it's the age old question of like, how do you rate a game day of launch when it has technical issues that you have to deal with? So probably worth getting into what those are, but there's a certain irony in that when we were like, yeah, how could you rate it a 6 out of 10?
A little bit ironic.
How could you rate it?
Man, this is a mess.
I remember thinking like, how could you rate it under a 9? And now it's like, exactly. Well, I can understand the argument for it.
I can too. I'm looking at my 89 that I got on our Fantasy Critic, and I'm grateful I got it based on the technical issues I'm having currently. I will say though, I'm frustrated by the discourse out there. There's always that, whenever there's a launch and there's issues with a game, there's always the subset of people who completely minimize the issues people are having. And that too greatly frustrates me. Like, just because you are having a good experience, which is entirely possible, different TVs, different situations, maybe your experience with the game, you navigated around all of the glitches you could encounter. you can't take away from the fact that other people, um, that they're blowing things out of proportion. Like,
Watch
there's
me.
no way.
Watch me discount your entire
Watch
lived experience.
exactly. Watch the internet do exactly that. So I've seen people saying like, "Oh, this has been completely overblown," and people are, you know, just completely blowing this out of proportion. And some may be, but
Yeah.
to say that, unequivocally is rather ignorant, because this game is in the hands of who knows how many people, and there's a there's a pretty decent amount of them are who are experiencing issues. So I just had to get that out of the way first. But yeah, this launch to me feels so. Essentially, I'll start with basically my day one experience. Put the game in, completely excited to dive into Horizon. We've been waiting forever. I mean, this is kind of kicking off the year right here. And just like any game, you get in and you toggle between performance and resolution, because that's our life here on console of the past couple years. Typically, you get in a game, and for most people, you check out resolution or performance mode, and it maybe looks slightly different, but the 60 FPS is just like such a game changer that, I mean, honestly, Miles Morales, those other games, I can hardly tell the difference between performance and resolution mode. And so you obviously take the 60 FPS. Well, before launch, this game was getting a lot of press for, no, I think people might be taking the 30 FPS route here. Like, the graphical fidelity is really crisp and it just looks so good. Well, the flip side of that is actually that in performance mode, this game is having some pretty serious issues, and it may depend on, we don't know at this point what the glitches are or what the bugs are that are causing this. I don't know if it's dependent on what TV you're using. But performance mode suffers greatly from lack of very low resolution. The assets, especially the foliage, while I was playing it, I spent the first, I think I've put maybe 3 to 4 hours in this game total. And I found myself switching back and forth between resolution and performance way more than I ever have in any other game, simply because I was dissatisfied with both. I would play in performance because I'm like, oh, I gotta have that 60 FPS. But after a while, I'd be like, this game looks like it's in 720p, like all of it. Very blurry. Everything's blurry.
The best
Um,
looking Switch game you've ever played.
yeah, what am I playing? Pokemon Legends here? It's a GameCube game. No, it's not that bad. But it was bad enough that I was like, this something's not right here. And so then I would go to resolution mode. And you have your own thoughts on resolution mode. For me, it's better. It was certainly better. But even in resolution mode, it didn't it didn't make up for the fact that it was in 30 FPS. Like, the
Mhm.
resolution mode to me looks as good as like Ghost of Tsushima looks in performance mode, clarity wise. And granted, there's a ton more detail in Forbidden West, and it's not always apples to apples. But the fact remains that neither of these modes seem to be operating at their full potential right now. There's something going on. And I finally got to a point. I got kind of out of the intro area into the actual Forbidden West, and I was like, you know what? This is. I was looking it up, and other people were experiencing the same thing as I was. And they did release a hot fix for a shimmering issue, which was to restart the game twice, and I was very hopeful that that would fix it. It did not. So as of now, we're still waiting for some sort of actual solution to the graphical problems we're seeing in game. But I have put it down since I haven't played it since Saturday night, because I am really looking forward to this game. And I think the game is going to be incredible once it's fixed. But I don't want to waste my first experience on this game. I don't want to waste any of my hours in this game, um, with the way that it's performing currently.
Yeah. Yeah, my initial experience has been similar, although I think I'm enjoying it a little bit more. I think the 30 FPS doesn't bother me quite to the extent it does you. But you know, I think it's interesting because when this game, like right before it launched, all of the reviewers who had their early copies, who put their videos out a week, couple of days beforehand, maybe I'm just in a particular bubble within the internet, but it felt like the vast majority of the discourse was pretty overwhelmingly positive. And I watched four or five
And
different.
particularly regarding the graphical fidelity
Right,
and the way it
including
runs.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm not just speaking about story. I mean kind of in its totality. And I watched four or five different reviews where they talked about, graphical fidelity in the different modes, and many of the reviewers touched on a few of the issues very lightly, but I didn't hear anything quite to the extent to what has been my experience, your experience, and others. It feels like it's maybe been downplayed a bit by kind of the initial wave of reviewers, and it makes you wonder, like, is this one of those situations where uh, the conspiracy theorists might say that, they don't want to lose their review codes with specific companies, so they're being positive and kind of touchy feely and trying not to upset the apple cart, as some say.
I can see two sides to that, namely maybe this I'd have to check when this is we're currently on patch 1.004 is when all these issues are present. I don't know if the review build that people were playing on was also patch 1.004 or if that was the day one patch that only launched on release day.
Right.
So it's possible that these bugs, these issues were introduced in a day one patch that reviewers never experienced. However, the only thing I find confusing about that is that many people were still recommending the resolution mode ahead of launch, which
Mm-hmm.
is
Is
pretty
indicative of the
rare.
issues.
A
Yeah,
little
it
bit
is rare.
indicative of the performance mode issues.
I agree. It is rare because most people I watch online tend to favor performance mode. Generally, if the modes are pretty close together in fidelity, I mean, who doesn't? Like, smoother FPS is a noticeable step up in quality, and so it is interesting that a lot of people have kind of favored resolution mode even from that review period. The other reason I'm not sure that that is the case is because if Guerrilla Games had it working that well, and then a patch on day one is causing this many issues, why wouldn't they roll that code back? Like
That's what I was thinking. Why have we not
that would
rolled
be a
back to
one,
1.003? You know,
which makes me think that that wasn't the experience of many of these reviewers. So that leads to what's another option for why it's been so much more positive, with, well, kind of like glossing over these issues a little bit more. And that leads me to what I personally feel a little bit of is, you're so excited about a franchise and a game that you don't want it to be, you don't want it to have a bad launch. You want it to be this incredible experience. That's very much how I feel. And that I'm in denial. I'm in complete denial right now, and we're going to get into that. No, I think that might play into it a little bit as well. Is like, Horizon has been such an important game to so many people that they don't want to, cripple the game because it has some fairly large technical issues at launch, maybe assuming that these are going to get worked out. Maybe they're not that big of a deal. And I think your mileage will vary a little bit on how much these issues impact you. And I do assume Gorilla will fix them. I think within the next couple of months, this will be an incredibly solid game, but that does not mean that we should gloss over these issues. And it's just kind of frustrating when you're looking to a bunch of these larger reviewers and you don't get any sense of this, because the first I heard about actual issues that seemed problematic was hearing kind of from your experience, because you started playing, like a day before I did. Um, so that is kind of my theory as
yeah.
to why some of this is happening.
Well, and I know that you and I, we specifically make it a point to pretty much never pre-order things, right? This is a common thing in the industry. Like you're just better off not pre-ordering because
Mm-hmm.
games launch in such a poor state. But this is interesting because Sony really have made themselves known for polish and quality with their first party games, to the point where I'm someone who does not pre-order games, and I felt safe pre-ordering a PlayStation exclusive. I felt like it was different, cut above the rest, you might say. And so this launch, I mean, it's absolutely tarnished my exemption list that Sony was on. It's made me, I don't do a double take at Gorilla as well. You know, we've all put Gorilla in this echelon of the highest tier of developers after Horizon Zero Dawn. And I'm not saying that they've fallen out of grace or anything, but and once this game gets optimized, hopefully, and everything's running better and looks the way it should, I like I said, I'm excited. I can't wait to get back to it. I have full confidence it's going to be a phenomenal game, on my game of the year list, near the top, and on many people's game of the year list. So I don't think that they're all of a sudden a bad developer, but this launch can't help but remind me and maybe some other people of a launch like Days Gone, where it just wasn't in a great state at launch. And the game is great to play now. It still has its issues, some people might say, but performance wise, Days Gone is fantastic now. I'm sure this game will get there. Um, but yeah, not great. So basically, let's start with, you know what? We'll get through everything. Let's start off with what we love. So I'll let you kick things off. Um, your
Yeah,
initial impressions, your first couple hours. What do you love about the game so far?
sure. Yeah. So I've gotten, I think, just about through the intro area, more or less. Not quite into the Forbidden West yet, but I'm about to head out for it. Um, my initial impression was mostly positive, and the positive things I love are knocking it out of the park. The storytelling felt immediately exciting and immersive to me. The just being back in this world feels awesome. The gameplay that I've played feels like a better version of what we had 5 years ago. It I we can get into this maybe as slightly a con too, that I don't know that they um, fully built certain things from the ground up again, but it feels like they've really polished and refined what they had built from 5 years ago. And so traversal feels better, combat feels better. The bow and arrow always was fun. It feels even better than it used to. The melee is better than it used to be, even though it's maybe still not the star of the show. The creature design is so cool, and from the outset, like the first boss you fight is super cool. We'll try and avoid, I think, spoilers here since it's just kind of a
Yeah.
NeverQuest show. But the first boss is super awesome, and it's like from the get go, it's epic. It's so much detail to these creatures. There's very a lot of care has gone into designing these things, and the combat reflects that. And so you probably remember from the original Horizon, you can scan creatures and it highlights certain areas that are weak points, but you can also like knock off canisters and power cells, and you get various types of items to collect based on if you can like knock certain pieces of a creature off before you kill it. And so it does that, I think, better than ever, from my initial experience. And
Yeah, one of my top things that is on my list of things I love is the creature design. I
yeah,
think I mean it was great in the first game, and they've notched it up to 11 here. Like
somehow they've
every
gone
creature,
up.
and
Yeah,
yeah, and I've seen a few more than you have being farther in the game, and it's just every single one I come across is just they're just so freaking cool. Like
hmm,
the creature design is off the charts, and they're very believable too. It's just amazing to look at um these creatures we're used to seeing in an organic form, and to see them as a machine in a very believable way. Like you believe that these, you know, even though they obviously didn't actually design the entirety of the machine, just what we see probably. You believe that all of those pieces work together to make this machine run. Like it's a very believable thing when you look at these operating in real time. They're pretty impressive.
yeah, that's awesome. It's so cool. And kind of along with that, there's some really within the first like intro area, there's some great action set pieces that kind of accompany like the boss fight, but some great, things that feel Uncharted-esque in a way, of just like cinematic. And there are moments where you feel like you're watching like a high budget action sequence in a movie, and it's super exhilarating. So I really love that. The final thing I really loved is I'll say on resolution mode on my particular TV, I think it looks phenomenal. The downside being the frame rate's not there, and that's frustrating. Like it's not perfect. It's a trade off, and we can talk more about the trade off in a minute
Do
because I
you
want to hear what
think
you
it
loved.
looks
But
so? I'm curious when you say it looks phenomenal. I agree it looks I guess I don't agree it looks phenomenal. I think it looks good, but I think that almost every other PS4 game I have that's gotten a PS5 upgrade looks sharper than even this in resolution mode. So you think does this look next gen? Does this look a step up above games you've played before in resolution mode?
frame rate aside, I think this looks next gen. It looks like at the top of the things I've experienced. But again, it's taking out the frame rate kind of undercuts that a little bit. So I want to qualify that. But
Sure.
I do think the actual graphical fidelity looks really good. I honestly do think it looks really good. Now, there's a caveat that I got a brand new OLED TV to experience this game, and I have not gone back and played other like PS4 exclusives in 4 or resolution or
That's
performance
true. And
modes
you're
yet.
now sitting a few feet from your TV instead of like
Right.
40,
So
right?
I've upped the game of my like setup to experience this. And so I need to go back and look to like have an accurate comparison. But I will say, just in terms of what I remember and think about, this feels really good. It feels like, you know, like top tier in terms of graphical fidelity to me, and I think that may vary on your based on your hardware. I also might just be blind. I don't know, but that's my initial take. However, it's and I want to leave a space for you to jump in because I think one of the big problems I have is you are sacrificing the frame rate, which you feel like after you've had it for a while. And we built PCs last year, so I've gotten used to 60 FPS on a PC, and we're in the next gen with the PS5 and Xbox, and we really should have 60 FPS in our platform or in our console games now. And so it's jarring not to have that. And what you said earlier about you found yourself switching back and forth between performance and resolution mode, I was doing the same thing because I didn't like, it's a little choppier when you're in 30 FPS. Like I think a little more comfortable with it than you, but even I find myself being like, I kind of miss the butter smooth feel of 60. And so I'd switch back and I'm like, oh, this is so much smoother, but it does not look great. So maybe I'll pause there and you can jump in, talk about what you loved, and then we can segue into some of those more negative things.
Yeah. Well, just real quick to comment on that before I get into what I loved about it. To me, and I'm picky. I'm kind of picky about graphics. I notice a lot of probably more than I wish I did about graphics in games. But to me, if the game looked truly phenomenal and like a step up from anything I've seen before it in resolution mode, I would definitely have continued playing at 30 FPS while waiting for the patch, because 30 FPS, you hate to see it, but at the same time, it's not the worst. I was able
Mm-hmm.
to play a little bit in resolution mode. You miss the 60, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. But at the end of the day, I didn't think the trade-off was worth the resolution and the detail I was getting. It didn't feel, I mean, at no point in my playthrough, even on resolution mode, was I taken aback in the way, not to continue to compare it to Ghost of Tsushima, but just so often while playing Ghost of Tsushima, um, I was just
That
I
is
was
a
just
beautiful game.
floored. I was
Yeah.
just floored by the atmosphere and the
Mm-hmm.
sharpness and the graphical fidelity and the movement of all the foliage and the clarity. And even in resolution mode, I feel like some textures are not quite right now. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like some things are just a touch blurry, or something is
I would
not rendering
agree.
properly.
I would say once in a while I catch a texture that is slightly off, but it's been few and far between enough that it's been enough for me to want to keep going right now. Um, but I have seen a couple of like an occasional flicker, an occasional texture
Yeah,
that's just off. I have seen a little bit of that. One of the things I had to do is I had to turn off the motion blur that was causing some weirdness. And once I
yeah,
turned
that
that off,
goes off immediately. Yeah,
that helped a lot. But there were occasional, like it's not perfect even in resolution mode. I do want to make that clear. I think it
yeah,
looks, for the most part, looks really good. There are still a few quirks occasionally, um, not anywhere near on the same level as the performance mode, but I think there are
absolutely.
some things there, especially if you're, you know, really particular, like Levi, if you're really particular about graphics and you hate noticing anything off, there probably are still going to be occasional things that
Yeah,
bother you.
and point being, I think it's not a matter of performance mode is bugged, so I'll just play in resolution mode. I think both of them, there's something off, and I think both can get significantly better.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope to see that with the next patch. What I loved about the game, I mentioned creature design. It is phenomenal. It's some of the best creature design in any game, hands down, full stop. The world, you mentioned the world as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just the map and traversing the world and I'll throw in a little side piece here, but the glider, once you get it, it's as great as
Mm-hmm.
you would hope. It's fantastic to be able to climb up to a high point, and there's like this little grapple hook that I can jump off of like the original game, and you're like, nah, forget that. I'm about to jump off this and just hover down to that town that's like
Mm-hmm.
a couple miles away, it would seem. It's
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. But the world is so cool. I mean, it gives you those Breath of the Wild vibes where you look around and you're just like, you see something in the distance and you want to go check it out. I can't wait to fully explore the world. And yeah, love the world. And then the other thing I love is, oh yeah, the narrative so far. I feel like they have truly stepped up their game with the facial capture, which was
I'd agree. Yeah.
a big sticking point for people in the first game. Um, they were very stoic and lifeless, most of them. And in this game, they are. I mean, it's that I will say that feels like a step up, even compared to just about anything else. The facial
Mm-hmm.
capture is excellent. I noticed the eye movement, the way they capture the emotions in characters' eyes, in conjunction with the mouth movement and everything. Just the face feels very real.
Yeah.
So that's been fantastic. And then also the writing. I mean, there was a character early on who ended up just being a kind of a throw-in side character. Didn't matter at all. But he has a story to tell, and if you're willing to sit and listen to it, he'll go through his whole spiel, and it was riveting. It was captivating. By the end of this conversation with this dude, I was like, this guy is awesome. I care about this guy, and he ended up not really amounting to anything, but I was just like, man, that's crazy. This random dude. I don't know. It just the writing was very good. So that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
my third thing. I'm really looking forward to. I've heard the side quests in this game are on par with main quests. So, and I believe it
I've
based
heard
on the
that too.
writing I've encountered.
I've heard that too, and based on the experiences I've had with like side characters and primary characters as you start progressing through the narrative has been excellent. Like you said, the characters look and feel real. I find myself in the cutscenes just sitting back and taking it in like I'm watching, a show or a movie, which is always great. Sometimes in video games, I'm kind of I don't mind cutscenes for the most part, but sometimes you find yourself like, okay, let's get back to the game, or somehow your phone is in your hand for a second and you're looking at Twitter. It's like, wait, I need to be watching this. With this, I've been riveted, just curious about what where the narrative's going, who these characters are, um, and listening to what they have to say. And the way it's delivered is also great. It feels like you're in a world, and I think that makes it feel really immersive, which is great. I think the narrative, the characters, and a lot of these other things make this feel like one of the most immersive games, with the exception of these technical issues that pull you right back out of it. And I think that's the
Yeah.
main gripe to be said right now is like, this
Well,
game is so close to being one of the best games ever if it can get out of its own way with the technical problems.
yeah. And I want to segue that into things we don't love, which we've touched on, which is technical performance. But I want to make it clear that it's not simply a matter of performance versus resolution mode. I have found other technical issues that are bothering me in this game that
Mm-hmm.
I had hoped Guerrilla Games would have kind of risen above since the first game. Um, but I'll go through my little list here of things I've encountered, and then you can add to it if you have any, or
I do.
ask me about it, or berate me for being too picky.
I will.
Um, excellent as usual. So, but I will say, in conjunction with the resolution issues I've had in the performance, there's been a lot of times playing this game where I kind of I think to myself, man, this feels like a Bethesda game, and I hate to say it because we hold Sony's first party to a higher standard and we expect more. Um, and not to just clown on Bethesda, but they are very well known for having buggy experiences, almost in such a way that people uh, almost like them for it, like that's what they are.
It's a bit of a meme.
And yeah, and so some other things other than just the blurriness and the resolution. I've experienced a lot of jank in controlling Aloy early on, and especially pertaining to traversal and climbing. Um, just she doesn't control as smoothly as you would hope. You think of playing Spider-Man, the recent Spider-Man games. the way that he effortlessly flows through the world and kind of always intuitively does what you hope he's going to do somehow perfectly. I often found myself fighting with Aloy and her getting stuck on ledges when I'm trying to move, or sometimes they'll do traversal paths where you're on like a limb of something and you're not supposed to jump. If you push X, you go too far. You're supposed to just push forward on the analog stick and she'll kind of skip across them, which I think we can probably relate to. That's in other games. But it doesn't accommodate the fact that sometimes pushing forward doesn't register her to make the jump. And so a player might push X. And this lends into another issue I had where this was the case. She was supposed to kind of hop across some beams, and I pushed X because she wasn't moving. She jumped clear over the first beam and in between the second and third beam, and I fell like 30 feet down and was on the outside of, this was essentially a building made of a building that wasn't finished, like beams. You know how you see that at a construction site? Well, I fell 30 feet down on the outside of the building, but was still like way off the ground, if that makes sense, on one of these beams. And so normally you can walk through it, right? The beams, obviously you can't walk through the beams, but you can walk through the spaces between. There was an invisible wall. And so I'm stuck on this beam way above the ground and I can't walk through it. It's just this invisible wall, which was a huge complaint I had with
Mm.
the first game. And I got to be honest, I haven't experienced invisible walls in many other games. It's not a common complaint I have of modern games, and it's something now that it's a bit of an MO for Gorilla at this point. I think I've actually encountered two invisible walls that were very immersion breaking. One was right next to a critical path. I was doing a quest, and there's this little section of water. I was like, oh, let me go in here and see if there's anything underneath the water. Invisible wall right before the water, and I was just like, all you had to do was make this a dead end. Like, I just that stuff that stuff really gets under my skin. So those two things have bothered me. Jank when controlling Aloy. When you jump to a ladder that's a little ways away, she'll often grab like the third rung, and her inertia will make her swing, and she'll clip through the ladder every time. And just things like that feel like the animations weren't fully finished or polished. She'll clip through a lot of objects when climbing. Pertaining to climbing again, I feel like the solution they had to the issue everyone had with Zero Dawn, where everything was labeled with yellow paint and you had very specific paths you could climb. Their solution to me in this game is um it's not a it's not a good compromise in my opinion. It is a compromise, but essentially I'll explain it for those who don't know. Basically, things are no longer painted. There's no longer one exact path you need to take to climb things. But it is still very Uncharted in that you can stare if you use your pulse, which is like your sight that you have where you can see things that people can't see. It'll tell you where you can climb and where you can't. But the problem is then you're constantly pushing your pulse in to find yellow markers again. It's the same thing, except for now I have to use my pulse. And the other frustrating thing is it doesn't really alleviate the problem from the original game, because the problem in the original game was I just want to climb this rock and get to this destination. Well, I can stare at a rock in Forbidden West. Maybe I can climb it, maybe I can't, but they'll look exactly the same. So the same problem exists. You can walk up to this rock and, oh, I can climb this one, but not this one. And it's very arbitrary. It's very game like. And that combined with the jank of Aloy's animations, for me, creates a lot of frustration when trying to climb things. I feel like their solution is not much of a solution for the problem in the original game. And for me, when I play like Assassin's Creed Origins in 2017, best climbing in a game I've probably ever played, even counting Breath of the Wild. You can
Really?
climb anything pretty much. I mean, it works well. There's no stamina. It's very intuitive. Animations are great, and I just feel like we need to get there with Horizon. This this antiquated system of very specific paths they want you to climb. It lends itself towards puzzles, which I think is why they want it. They want certain areas that you have to figure out how to get to, but I don't think it's worth the trade-off of the frustration of not being able to climb things you should be able to climb elsewhere in the world. So um those are my main ones. I've encountered a few bugs, which I think you have too, and I'll elaborate on one of mine when you get to it. I've encountered some other jank with NPC dialogue in a town where, like, every 5 feet, this guy would be like, "Oh, there's an Osram nearby with contracts if you're interested." And I would walk like 10 feet, and someone else would be like, "Hey, there's an Osram nearby with
Have
contracts
you
if you like."
heard?
Yeah, like literally the entire town would not shut up about it. This dialogue was happening every like 10 seconds, and I was like,
Maybe
"Good
it's a
lord, this
sign
is."
that
It's
you
just,
need
yeah,
to
I
go
was like,
check
I
out
gotta
the
go see this
Osram.
Osram. Have you heard the good word about the Osram? He's
Yeah.
got contracts for people. And I was just like, all of this combined just feels like this game. Oops, there goes my filter. This game needed more time. It feels like it needed more time. And I'm just a little surprised because it seemed like they pushed it, and it seemed like they wanted to have it polished and ready to go and not have crunch, right? That was the big headline.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but this game feels unfinished at this point. It feels like it needs a few more months in a lot of ways, in my opinion, and from my experience.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say, separating the two things, I'm glad they didn't crunch their developers over the holidays, assuming that is true. That's great. But there's still issues at launch, which kind of makes you question why couldn't they have waited a few more months? I don't know. Maybe we all would have revolted, but it certainly feels like this game would have benefited from 2 to 3 months extra time to refine it. Um, I'd agree. I think so. Let's start with climbing. This is earlier when I said they didn't build some systems from the ground up, they just refined and polished them. That's how I feel about climbing does feel better than it did in the first one so far. I don't know if I've had enough to fully say that with any veracity, but the climbing does feel a little smoother to me. I think there's sometimes a few different paths you can take, which I like. That makes it feel a little bit more immersive than just having the one exact path. There are times when using the scan feels kind of satisfying, but like you said, there are times where it's like I don't want to have to keep using my focus to try and find these paths. So it makes it more realistic and makes it stand out less in the moment by obfuscating it through an extra click you have to make fairly frequently, and that's not ideal. And I definitely agree with that. So I think it's a compromise in the sense that they've made it a better version of the original climbing, but it's still that mechanic, right? So you should know that going into it. If that really bothered you, probably still will really bother you. It didn't horribly bother me in the original game or in this one, but it's noticeable. There are times where it's like I'm in this giant open world and I'm trying to scale a mountain. I should be able to get up on this rock and I can't. And so those things are felt and they do detract from the immersion. Um, I have not noticed as much of the like Aloy jank of her like swinging through things, but maybe I just haven't had enough time for it yet. I believe you on that. Um, I did notice there was one time where I got stuck on a ledge and was like trying to press forward and it wasn't quite responding. It's only happened to me once so far, so I didn't chalk it up to anything, and I thought maybe it was just kind of a fluke, but sounds like maybe there's a bit of a pattern there that needs some refinement. Um,
Yeah, whatever it's called, where object detection, or like I think of Crash Bandicoot, where everyone complained about how his model was sliding off of objects, making the game harder. I don't know what the technical, how all of that works, but for some reason the way that she interacts with objects when climbing is just not as
mhm.
refined as I think we've come to expect in other games.
Yeah, I will say one of the bugs I noticed within the first area, at one point, like you climb on, you're like up on a scaffolding of some sort on kind of a ruin or something, and she's kind of balancing on this beam or the steel girder, and her legs were like skittering. Like they weren't skittering like through things, but it looked like she was doing this really weird tap dance while crouched on the thing. And I took a little video, or like it took a video capture of it because it was kind of amusing, but it was also like a little bit of a bummer. And I only saw it that one time, but there have been a few things here and there where it's like, this isn't free of bugs for sure. there are some noticeable ones. That wasn't at all game breaking for me, but it takes you out of the moment. It's like I'm scaling this
Right.
humongous
As
monument.
funny as they are, you'd rather they weren't there. Like,
Right. And it's like I'm scaling this humongous monument, and there's these giant beasts in the distance, and the horizon is far off
it's
and
majestic.
majestic and epic, and this music is playing, and then I'm skittering, and it's it's
Doing
like,
a little jig.
yeah, it's fine. But the more frustrating bug I ran into in the intro areas, there's this one point where you're climbing this kind of this building type thing, and you have to use your bow to shoot these two targets that kind of release these two pipes or appendages. You're trying to like basically unplug this giant piece of machinery, and your bow can like shoot and detach them supposedly. And so the bug I had is the first time I got up there, there's like a glowing yellow light where you're supposed to shoot it. And it's like, okay, if Aloy's like, if I just shoot this, it'll detach and fall free. I'm like, sweet. So I shoot it. Nothing happens. I'm like, okay, try a few more times. I do this zoom in, slow down. I hit as many different spots that seem specific as possible. And then I try, like, I already have one.
Can I take a guess as to what was happening?
You can go
My
for it.
guess, when you told me, you sent me this
Mm-hmm.
video and it's you repeatedly shooting the point you're supposed to shoot and nothing's happening. Um, I remember there's multiple of those that you're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to hit. My guess is you didn't hit the first one yet.
Yes, that's correct. And so it wasn't at first. I thought this is a game breaking bug. I can't continue. So what I did is I just restarted, hoping that would help. And as I scaled back up this thing again, I realized, oh, I missed one the first time. I shot it and it worked. Went up, shot the second one, and then it detached as well. All was good. But so I think this is a less severe bug, but it's like they didn't test all of the different use.
It still speaks to a game not being ready, not being play tasted enough, not
Right,
having these things ironed out. Because if you had play tested this properly, you should be able to hit those in any order you choose,
right.
right?
And
I
if you're
mean,
stuck,
unless
if you detach the second one first, what they should then have is Aloy mutter to herself like, "Oh, I think I missed one," or or
yeah,
at the very
something.
least, it lets it detach, and then you can figure out that you
Hmm.
didn't get the other one.
And so
Um,
that to me still speaks to the fact that the game feels
yeah,
not quite finished.
it's
And
like
I
they
have,
haven't fully tested all of the different
mhm,
like potential paths you could take.
and
Because
there's
I
a lot of room for that. I've heard a lot of people talking about describing a bug on forums where in the first town that you come to, there is an NPC who shows a little icon. He's a cloth merchant or like an armor merchant, and he shows the icon. It communicates to the player, "Hey, I'm a merchant," and you can't interact with him. And people are like, "There's a bug. I can't interact with this merchant in town." Well, you can't interact with him because you haven't progressed the story far enough. Everyone's on strike or something like that, and they're not working. Um, and so logically, sure, that makes sense. But from a gameplay standpoint, that's not communicated very well to the player,
Mhm,
and it leaves room for gameplay problems like that, where you
right.
think, "Oh, my game is broken."
Yeah,
You
because you
think
should
your
say
game is
something like,
broken.
"Oh, I can't help you right now. You need to
Yeah,
take
or
care of."
don't have a symbol. Don't have a symbol there that says, "Hey, I'm a
Right. Don't
merchant.
have a
Come talk to
symbol.
me."
Right.
Like,
He should tell you about the Ossurum, like the other people.
yeah, he should be telling me about the
Have you heard
Ossurum
about the
nearby that has
Ossurum?
contracts. So yeah, that's the one I've encountered that kind of reminded me of what you've described,
Hmm.
and I just feel like there's
Yeah.
probably a lot of that in
It's
this
sort
game,
of
and to
like,
me, it just says
yeah, it's like a
it needs
roundabout
another
bug
six
or
months.
something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, totally.
play
Um,
testing.
yeah. So there's been a few things like that. And there's been enough of them that like no single one of these experiences for me has been in any way game breaking. The sum collection of them starts to become a little irritating, and make you feel like this should have come out a few months from now. As much as I hate to wait, like this probably should have come out at least a
Yeah,
few months from now.
and for someone like me, it's very frustrating because, as I've mentioned to you, we wait years for these games, right?
Hmm.
And
What's a
then
few extra
we're
months?
exactly. We're so excited launch day. We're like, all right, let's go. We finally got this in our hand. It's been delayed once,
I quit my
twice.
job, left my family. Let's
Exactly.
go.
You finally get it. And now I'm in a position where, well, let's be clear, is this game playable? Yes. Yes, the game is playable. You could play through the entire game and probably moderately enjoy your experience, if not more so. There's
Hmm.
people who have. But my big thing is you only get to play a game for the first time once. You only get to experience anything for
Hmm.
the first time once, right?
Yeah.
And when you wait 5 years for a game, I don't want my experience with this game to be under the current technical issues I'm facing, because
Yeah,
it's kind of depressing. It takes me out of it. It's distracting.
it
And
is. And
so I've had to put the game down, despite the game being on my shelf in my console. I'm still waiting for the game,
yeah,
because to me it's not in a state where I'm ready to finish it. So
yeah, I mean, I agree. Is it playable? Yes. Did I leave my wife and kids? Yes. Do I have to beg my wife to take me back? Yes. It's a frustrating place that Guerrilla Games has put me in, having to beg to come back to my family. Thanks a lot, Guerrilla Games.
you
Um,
should ask them to do something about that too in the next patch.
maybe they could send me like a free steel book. um,
Oh,
um,
that's a good segue into what else we wanted to talk about, unless you have more.
I don't. I think the key is that the game's playable. I mean, it's pretty obviously awesome. It's just it's not quite there. I wish they had waited a few extra months. I would have been here just as happily a few months from now, 3, 4, 5, 6 months from now,
If not
as
more so with
if
the
well
games that's
more
coming
so.
out around,
I mean, you look at how
you
happy I
know?
get after getting into the experience. I would have been more happy with that. But the short of it is, I think it's a great game. It's probably worth waiting on it. Like if you're on the fence and you're not quite ready to pull the trigger, I think it's just wait until Gorilla announces some more patch
Yeah,
updates
absolutely.
and see, I'm sure I really think these will get resolved. This is a high profile game. I do think Gorilla cares. There's a lot of love put into this game in many areas. So if you're willing to wait a couple of months, it's probably going to be in much better shape. If you're not willing to, my last recommendation would be, personally, I think resolution mode looks really good, and the 30 FPS is, not detracting enough that I probably am going to keep playing. I don't know that I can wait, and I think it's good enough that I'm still going to really enjoy it. So if you can't wait, I would recommend the resolution mode, but I would also recommend trying both for yourself, because you never know exactly what's going to work for you. But that would be my thoughts on where we're at with
Hmm.
Horizon.
Yep. So it's just sad. I'm sad. Thanks for bearing with our complaining. That's essentially what it comes down to. It's been a frustrating weekend, and I want to play the game, and I can't wait to. I'm sure it's going to be a great game, but for now,
Yeah,
it's
don't
it's
worry.
in a frustrating
In a
place.
few months,
So,
Levi, there'll be an Osserum waiting with contracts outside the village.
what if he's not? What if he gets tired of waiting?
That's a good point. Maybe you should
Wouldn't
play.
that be awful? Okay, so more complaining about indirectly about Horizon.
Yeah. Enough
Let's get
negative.
into
Let's segue
exactly.
to the negative.
So Zach did not get his. If you haven't heard the Best Buy saga, he did not get his collector's edition
Yeah.
of Forbidden West. However, um, and this is not news. This was actually known going into the launch, but it is still absolutely hilarious in my
News to
opinion.
me.
News to
Uh,
Zach.
so yeah, let
And
me
what
set
is
it
it?
up
Yeah, go
with.
ahead.
Let me set this up because a month or so ago, I was a little late pre-ordering because, like we talked about, we tend not to pre-order. I finally decided, you know what, I'm going to pre-order Horizon. What could go wrong? And I think Horizon's still going to be a worthwhile enough game that I don't think it's the end of the world to have pre-ordered it. But I decided I'm going to do it, and I pre-ordered the collector's edition. So there's a couple of different editions, but the collector's was the $200 edition that comes with like a mammoth, like one of the robot mammoth statues. It comes with a steelbook case and obviously the game, right? Now, that what I just said, that probably makes you think, oh, cool, there's a statue, there's a steelbook case, and there's the game that's in the case, right? There's a game case that's made of steel, and they're giving you the game. Reading between the lines, like the brilliant little researcher I am, I assumed I was getting a physical copy of the game, which is my preference. If I'm going to be buying, like, especially if I'm getting a collector's edition and I'm spending like $200 on one game is kind of stupid, but I was going to do it. What I have since found out, I didn't even get mine. Go back and listen to our previous NeverQuest to learn about how I didn't even get my collector's edition despite pre-ordering it. But what I've since found out is that they give you the steel bookcase and a digital copy of the game. And that's true for the $200 collector's edition, as well as like the $250 Regalia edition, which is like the slightly better collector's edition, I guess. Um, and I feel like that's absurd that they would give you a steel book and not the game itself. Like what is even the point?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like it reminds me of the eBay things where like they're selling you a console, and then you look at the fine print and it's like, oh, it was the box, and they're scamming you. Like,
Yeah.
it's not to that extent, but it reminds me of that. It's like you have to read the fine print to know that there's not a disc in the case they're giving you. They're giving you a case with a digital code, so you will
Right.
forever have an empty case on your shelf.
I mean, I guess you can still
And
display it, so maybe it's not complete. Like
yeah, but
maybe,
like
but it is. It feels silly. Like
it's just
just give me
weird.
the disc. Like what's
And
wrong
here's
with me
my
having?
thing. Here's my thing. Of everything in that package, I guarantee the disc is the cheapest part. It's got to be.
Yeah.
So why did they not include a disc in the collector's edition?
So I can't lend it to
Put
my
your
1,000
tinfoil
friends.
hats on.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
So I can't lend it to my thousands of friends. But
Exactly.
maybe, I mean,
No, I think
that's
really.
really
I
why,
think really.
probably. Yeah. Because then if you don't have a physical copy, you can't lend it to someone. They're more likely to just go buy it. I don't even think
And not
that's
just
fully
lending,
tinfoil
not
hat.
just
Yeah.
lending. Let's say you resale. Let's say you sell your game.
Hmm.
Someone buys your game from you. That's a sale that Gorilla doesn't get, that PlayStation does not get.
Hmm.
And so very surreptitious, which is a theme right now with how Sony's
Indeed.
handling Horizon, of them to do this. I think it's kind of scummy, and I think it's
Yeah.
fully intended to keep people from being able to resell their games, which
But
is what digital copies have been for a while now. That's why they push them.
yeah. But you know what? Thankfully, Best Buy bungled my pre-order, and I didn't get it. Day of, little Zach shows up to Best Buy, all excited, bright-eyed, and bushy-tailed, uh, and they, to be told that no, we don't have it in stock. You don't get one, which was heartbreaking at the time. But you know what? You know what I did? I bought the PS4 version for $60 and
You
upgraded for
save
free
$10.
for $10. Yeah, but the principle feels good. Like I feel like they I wasn't gonna get my digital or my physical copy of the game, and then I didn't even get my pre-order because Best Buy can't handle things, and a little frustrated with how Sony tends to handle some of their like pricing and
Yeah.
consumer related decisions. So
Well, that's
that $10 is a symbol of rebellion.
uh-huh. And that's a great segue into my final um berating of PlayStation here that we've been talking a little bit about. Um and that's having to do with this whole PS5 versus PS4 copy of Horizon that was completely bungled months ago, if anyone recalls. They came out a long time ago, I think at the announcement of Horizon, and said there will be a free upgrade path from the PS4 version to the PS5 version. It's all about player choice, this, that, and the other thing, right? And then further down the line, lo and behold, the PS5 version is $10 more. It's $70. The PS4 version is $60, and there will not be a free upgrade path. Well, the
Mhm.
internet did what it does, got very upset, sent them clips of "look what you said," and Sony had to backtrack. They had to say, "Okay, we're sorry. Moving forward, PS5 games will be $70, and there will be no free upgrade path, but for Horizon, there will be." So they kind of had to eat crow, and they had to, take the loss, right? Well, they've come under a lot of scrutiny recently because the physical edition in a store is one thing. You can walk in, say, I want the PS4 version. It's going to be $60. You're going to get your free upgrade. On the digital storefront, however, Sony has seemingly gone out of their way to do their best to legally, at least they presume legally, hide the fact that you can get a free upgrade for the PS4 version. And basically, how they're doing that is, in the store, they are specifically promoting the PS5 version at $70 and saying, hey, with the PS5 version, you also get the PS4 version for $70, which is the exact same as buying the PS4 version at 60 and getting the PS5 version for free, right? Except for Sony makes 10 extra dollars. They're trying to still make that money they had intended on making. And the PS4 version that you can buy for 60 is being kind of swept under the rug, digitally speaking. It's much harder to find on the store. And no doubt a lot of people who don't know probably have bought the PS5 version not knowing, especially digitally. I could see this physically because
Mhm.
personally, I care too much about cases and things like that. I bought the PS5 physical edition because I wanted to have the PS5 case. But on a digital storefront, it doesn't matter. They're both just licenses. And so the extra $10 is completely unnecessary. It's very anti consumer, very surreptitious of them to do this. Um, because they're selling the same product twice, one for $10 more is essentially what they're doing.
Yeah. I looked for this on PS5 before I installed mine, and I could not find the PS4 version on my searching on my PS5 for Horizon. I was not able to find the PS4 version. On my PS4, I was able to find it. But yeah, they have two versions in the store, which in and of itself is just kind of
Yeah,
ridiculous.
you
But
could make the argument that that alone is poor business practice. Like that is anti-consumer to have two versions.
it is. It's a bad experience, and it's intentionally obtuse. Um, did they uphold their word? I think technically, yeah. It's one of those things where they're like, but
Legally,
technically, and you know
yes.
what? You're like,
Hmm.
based on what you said, technically, you are correct, and you did, and that you know what they do offer it. But like you said, I think there's a lot of people who aren't. They don't have their fingers on the pulse of like gaming Twitter, and they're not watching a ton of other reviewers and seeing like
They're not
what
listening to NeverLag,
they're not listening to NeverLag
these
yet,
people.
and they should be, but they're not. But because of that, like, why all games on PS5 are $70 now? Like, I could see myself doing that if I wasn't paying attention. Um,
Yeah.
and
You'd be like, oh, cool. I get the PS4 game too. That's cool.
yeah,
I won't ever need it, but I have it.
yeah, or just like, yeah, that's the price. I mean, like, I don't know why I would need the PS4 version at this point, but
Exactly.
um, or maybe someone who doesn't have a PS5 yet, but is hoping to get one soon. And in the meantime, they
Exactly.
want to play on
Yeah.
PS4. They spend $70. They could have spent $60 and gotten the same thing and still upgraded it on their PS5. So it's clearly intended to trick people who aren't paying attention so that they get some extra money. And that just, it sucks, especially because it's like in direct opposition of the intent of what people were mad about. Like, they tried to do it with as little give as possible. And
Yeah.
I think they found a solution that worked for them, but it sucks for
Oh, they
consumers.
absolutely did. They got in a boardroom and they said, look, because of the PR, we have to legally do this.
Mhm.
How can we do this to the letter of the law and still make the money we intended to make on the
Yeah.
PS5 version? And that's exactly what this is. So it's scummy. It feels bad. Um, it, it's bad optics. It's bad optics for Sony, which is kind of par for the course for them over the past few years. They're not quite winning the PR battle in the same way that Microsoft has been. And it's hard to imagine a paradigm shift. Um, because as upsetting as it is, people are Horizon Forbidden West is going to sell through the roof, and money talks. So I don't know. We'll probably never see a world where um, Sony becomes more consumer friendly unless Microsoft really starts to crush them in the money department. But
But yeah,
frustrating.
it is frustrating. So, if you are still thinking about picking up Horizon, pick up the PS4 edition and then upgrade for free.
Yeah, yeah. So, anyways, that's our saga. It's been a frustrating Horizon weekend for myself personally, and I think you too for other for other reasons.
For
But
other, yeah.
yeah, I plan to just dive into this game face first, and it's been bumpy. So, and now here we're looking down the barrel of Elden Ring, and I'm like, man, if they don't get this
I
patch
know.
out in the next day, like, what do I do then? Maybe I wait to play Horizon till later in the spring? Like, I don't know. It sucks. It's all bad timing. It's all
It's
bad
like
timing.
it's like
And
Gorilla can't help releasing these games right around something else monumental. Like
yeah.
Horizon Zero
Oh
Dawn
yeah,
was
no
released
kidding. That's a good
Horizon
point.
Zero Dawn was released like 3 days, I think, before the Switch and Breath of the Wild. And this is what it was launched for. It's 7 days before Elden Ring comes out, which
That's hilarious because up to this launch, people are like, I bet they're so glad that they're not launching at the same time as Breath of the Wild 2. But ironically, they're launching right in front of possibly the biggest game of the past since Breath of the Wild.
yeah.
That is
The only
actually incredibly comical.
the only thing I can think maybe helps is from soft games, or maybe niche is probably too small of a word, but I think they're maybe a touch more niche than like Zelda
Maybe
games are.
the hype
The
is off
hype
the
is
charts for
big,
this right
but
now.
I think, Zelda, there's a lot of very, very casual gamers who are like, oh, gonna pick up a Zelda game, who also may have picked up Horizon. Elden
Very
Ring
true.
might sift out a little bit more people, but I don't know. Like you said, it's one of the most hyped games of the year. And we've talked about how Elden Ring is probably going to be a more approachable FromSoft game than some of their previous games. So
I mean,
it
it's
still
the
kind
Breath
of
of the
feels like
Wild, Dark
it's
Souls.
the Breath of the Wild of Dark Souls, and Horizon
It's a
is
shame.
several days before it. Yeah,
It's a shame that Horizon wasn't ready last year, because surely they would have launched a week before Cyberpunk.
right.
They just missed that one, so they had to catch Elden Ring.
That's right. Yeah. History
Yeah.
is time is a circle, and empires will rise and fall, and Guerrilla Games will launch their latest Horizon days before something else transformative. So
Something massive. That's so funny. Oh, what a mess it's created for my timeline, though. So, anyways, well, yeah, I had more, but we'll wrap it up. We're incapable of being concise when talking about anything. So,
this
if
is
you
us
stuck
being
with us,
concise.
this is the concise version. Yeah, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sticking with us. This has been another episode of NeverQuest. And remember, you can support us over on Patreon, not Portreon, at
Or Portreon,
patreon.com.
wherever you want to throw your money for us.
Well, I don't know if we can find it if they throw it there.
Yeah,
We
good
want to be
point.
able to find it. Patreon.com/NeverLag, and right here on YouTube or listening where you get your podcasts. Like, share, subscribe, do all the fun stuff everyone always tells you to do. That would be awesome. And we'll catch you next time on NeverQuest.